What's up? This is your host, Non-Fungible TC, Non-Fungible today and Non-Fungible tomorrow. And today we have a very different format from a regular show. Rather than talking about the crypto market, rather than talking about the NFT market, today I want to go into a deep dive of a report that is available for free, and talk about that report. And that is the report from Citi, Citigroup. So for those of you who do not know, Citigroup is a huge bank. Have you heard of Citibank? So it is a very a company with a lot of resources, right? So with these companies, they have a lot of resources to do different type of research and so on, right? So it's always helpful to look at these different type of reports by different people, look at the reports by these companies, and also try to have a better understanding of what these companies are looking at when they evaluate the metaverse, and also look at different type of metaverse platform and what do they think the metaverse is, right? So this report, the link in this is in the description below. It's called Metaverse and Money, right? Deciphering the future. So basically, what they are saying is that, hey, the metaverse is a concept that has been here for a few decades, but the interest in this virtual world spiked at the end of 2021, following a rise in the sales of NFTs, and also big announcement from big tech players indicating the interest and investment in the space, right? So they talked about how it is potentially a 8 trillion to 13 trillion opportunity, the different type of use cases in the metaverse, and also the status of the metaverse right now is still very early, and because everyone is still building the infrastructure, and also money in the metaverse, right? Which is quite interesting because Citibank is a bank, right? It is a financial service company, so that's why they would look at the money in the metaverse. So I want to go through the report today. But as you can see, there's 184 pages. So this is a very long report. And this report was just released in March 2022. So basically, it was just released last month, right? So this is a very new report. The data inside is very updated. And that is the reason why I wanted to share this, because it is a very helpful report. It has very updated data. So rather than going through all of the pages, I would go through the different key insights that I've seen in this report, and also I'll go through what I think, some analysis and so on, right? So if you look at this report is actually a report where they have invited different type of contributors, right? You have people within the Citigroup, which is very good researchers, and they also have expert contributors. Like for example, even Yasu, the co-founder of Animoca brand, is also here sharing his insight in certain topics that they will cover in this report. So basically, they're talking about, hey, how the metaverse is a big opportunity in the future, and how there's a lot of business and a lot of ecosystem will exist in the metaverse, and how money would be traded in the metaverse, right? It could be cryptocurrency, it could be fiat currency, it could even be CBDC, right? And also stable coins. So basically, in a quick summary, what they said is that there is actually two types of definition of the metaverse. The first type of definition is, just focusing on the AR and AR headset, right? Which is basically what Facebook is trying to do, right? In the future, you could buy an Oculus Rift, you can wear that AR headset, enter into a virtual world, have virtual experiences, and that is to them a metaverse, right? But actually, according to Citibank, if this is the case, then the market estimate is going to be 1 trillion to 2 trillion, right, in 2030, okay? So this basically 1 trillion to 2 trillion is basically the money that could be generated, or the money that is being in this potential market. But however, if you have a broader definition, for example, what they say is that rather than just focusing on the AR and VR headset, if you look at the metaverse in a broad aspect, right? For example, right now you're using a computer, and then you could have access to a computer game or a 3D platform where you can use your own avatar, your own NFTs, and have different type of experience. That if you construe it broadly, then the metaverse could have a potential of 8 trillion to 13 trillion dollars, right? So that is, the market size of, a metaverse that is more accessible, okay? So they were talking about metaverses, platforms have different type of utility, smart manufacturing, healthcare, education, developer creator economies, virtual advertising, virtual spaces, the social commerce, and also digital events, and then virtual cities and public services. So if you go to the next page, basically they explain how content has changed, right? In the past, when we look at video games or if you watch a video, you could have tolerate a latency, right? Like a 75 to 150 millisecond latency, like a delay, right? Because right now you're watching this video, there is a delay because you are absorbing the content. You are listening to my voice when I talk about this project or this report. But for gamers, the delay has to be even shorter with 30 millisecond, which because you have to react to that game, right? And then what they're saying is that because right now all the PC hardware or even the mobile phones, they could not be as quick for the demand of the metaverse, right? Because in the metaverse, it's basically similar to a real world, right? Because you need like an immersive experience like a real world. So they say that the latency would be sub 12 milliseconds. But right now, no infrastructure supports this yet, even maybe in the VR headset or something like that. Your computer needs processing power. It takes time for it to process the data and to show you the images that you experience, right? So they are saying that in terms of the infrastructure, the metaverse is still very early, not because of the 3D render, like not because of the gameplay or the experience, but it's more about whether they could deliver this content really quickly, right? And at the same time, this actually relates to 5G as well, and also the hardware infrastructure, right? Like the graphic cards, the processing speed, but also the internet speed, because the metaverse is a social hub where you can interact with different people in different online platforms, right? Then they also talked about money in the metaverse because, this is like a report from a financial institution. They said that within the metaverse, you will have in-game tokens, which is the use case is for gaming, right? But there are some limitations because it's centralized and there is no interoperability. Now they say that, hey, actually cryptocurrency could also be a money in the metaverse, right? There are different use cases, but there are limitations in terms of the price fluctuation. And then they also talk about stable coins could also be traded in the metaverse, but then there are other limitations. And then going further, they talk about CBDCs, which is the central, the money issued by different governments, right? For the Chinese renminbi, Naira, sand dollars, and so on, right? But then they do also share the limitations, and also fiat currency, which is what we use to pay for services right now. They also said that, hey, a lot of economy could be paid using fiat as well in the metaverse in the future. So there are different type of money in the metaverse, and therefore there is like to them 8 trillion to 13 trillion opportunity in 2030. Okay. So I think this is definitely a great report. If you only want to read one report and if you want to spend time in one report to kind of have a grasp of what the metaverse is, this is definitely a great report to watch because it is so updated. It's just released like in March, right? Just last month. And it talks about different type of things, even like the recent hacks in Axie Infinity. They even talked about it, right? So this is the table of content. They talk about finance in the metaverse. What do they think? Why the metaverse? What is the TAM, like total estimated market value? Like how many users are gonna be using the metaverse? Historically, in the past, in the future. What exactly is the metaverse? What do industry professionals think of the metaverse? The different type of use cases, metaverse as a service, and also infrastructure, which is the idea of decentralized and centralized metaverses. And also DAOs, what is the role of decentralization and DAOs in the metaverse, and also building the infrastructure in the metaverse. And then they also talk about digital asset, right? Because when we talk about the metaverse, we talk about wanting to have like an avatar or wearable that you are using in one metaverse or platform that could be interoperable, which means that you can actually use the same wearable in another metaverse platform. And that is truly a metaverse because you could have the same identity in different worlds, right? So they talk about digital asset, the idea of NFTs as well. But at the same time, how there's a lot of rug pulls, counterfeits in terms of NFTs and watch trading, right? And then they also offer criticism in terms of Web 3.0 about NFTs and DeFis and so on like that. And they talk about the money and DeFi in the metaverse. So this is definitely a very comprehensive report. They had different expert views, and then in the end they talk about regulations and social political considerations, which is quite interesting as well. But to see, because if there's money involved, would there be regulations? How is copyright being enforced in the metaverse? how is a trademark being enforced in the metaverse, and whether these companies filing for trademarks for metaverse could, protect themselves, right? So, this is the quick take of the report. What you can do in the metaverse, how big it could be, how is it the same as virtual reality, which I also said, if it's construed very narrowly, then it's just, VR headsets and things like that. But if it's being construed very widely, then it's not just virtual reality, right? They talk about the infrastructure, how to support to have like a very seamless experience. How does money look like? How many metaverse would be. So basically they're saying that, hey, there's different type of platforms, and how do we put them, integrate them together. What does blockchain and Web3 have to do with the metaverse, right? Which they have the debate of Web2 and Web3, right? They also talk about, do we really want a Web3 metaverse that is decentralized, right? And if things are decentralized, wouldn't that affect how the experience is, right? Because you have less control. And also the role of NFTs in terms of digital asset ownership, and also if the laws and regulations ready for the metaverse. So if you want to have a quick take, just watch this page. Basically it summarizes the report very nicely, and also the different angles that they look at, right? So basically you have they talk about metaverse finance, and then they have bullet points that you can see, and then they talk about why the metaverse and the total metaverse users, like TAM, like total addressable market, like how many people or the usage of that metaverse, right? So I think it is very interesting how they talk about how they calculated this in globally, and also in certain countries. And they also talk about they invite other industry experts to chip in into that specific idea, right? How many people do you think would be in the metaverse? And then they talk about metaverse historically and today, the Google trend record. Before, there aren't a lot of excitement about the metaverse, but when Facebook started announcing it, there is a huge excitement. But then the excitement, is it dying right now in March? Because we don't see an actual thing or have an actual concept of the metaverse yet, right? And then interestingly, they also talk about the term metaverse in company filings and earnings report for US companies. So there is, companies are definitely looking into the metaverse, trying to build like a virtual experience for their company, right? So if you continue, they talk about the origins of metaverse. When did this term come from, right? And also Ready Player One, which is the movie that a lot of people have seen, and which kind of explains how the metaverse is, where you have a place with different type of platforms, with different type of experience, different type of games, and your avatar can be interchangeable into these different platforms. So therefore, you have a gaming and social experience in these online platforms, right? So basically it says that, hey, there is no one size fit all definition of the metaverse, but there are some ways that we could try to identify the metaverse, and in different period of time, maybe our definition for the metaverse would be different, right? And also from a Web 2 and Web 3 perspective, there is different ideas of the metaverse, so this is quite helpful. And then they also talk about having an interview with different type of industry experts about their thoughts on the metaverse. And then I really like how they have different charts to show you what exactly is the metaverse, right? You have the space, which is the virtual world, and then you have the interface, which you could use sensory tools like AR, VR technology. And then because there is going to be economy in the metaverse, there is a money structure, crypto and non-crypto, and also the computing power, like the infrastructure behind that metaverse, right? So I'm just gonna go through everything really quickly, and then they talk about embracing the metaverse with Web3. So if you are new to Web3, Web2, it talks about basically what the differences are, and this is a very helpful idea of what is Web1. Web 2 is basically just apps or read and write where you passively get information, right? But Web 3 would be decentralized apps, and it's more like you have more control of your own data. And also I think access medium, this is actually interchangeable, right? Web 2 could also be Internet of Things, but if we look at the metaverse, right? Let's say metaverse is separate from Web 3, then the access medium will be AR, VR devices, or other type of mobile portable devices. But then you have a virtual aspect to it, rather than just looking at a flat website. You'll be going into a virtual space with the information that you could gather from the website, but interacting in a virtual space. Okay. So they talk about asking people to define the metaverse, and and also the use cases of Metaverse, which we talk about. So this is actually very helpful. It talks about the opportunities for content creators to make something unique and find a niche for themselves in the Metaverse, right? For example, creating certain type of experiences. And they also talk about workspaces and community, building, like meeting up together in a Facebook Horizon workroom, or meeting people rather than just using a sandbox where you could just see someone's video. Right now in the Metaverse, you could actually see each other in the avatar form, and you could walk around this virtual space, right? And they talk about how digital events, for example, Travis Scott performed a virtual concert inside Fortnite, which is a game, right? So how the Metaverse could empower people to have different type of experiences that they might not have in real world. So the Metaverse Fashion Week just happened like last month, and they also have this as an example, right? So if you're looking for case studies, this report is definitely very helpful for you to grasp an understanding of the potentials of the Metaverse and what they mean by talking about the Metaverse and its 8 to 13 trillion valuation. So this is a fashion in the Metaverse, how people can experience virtual advertising, how brands could create maybe a game experience so that people can enjoy it. For example, even LV, right, for their anniversary, they created a game that could also be categorized as a Metaverse, because that game is a virtual experience, right? And social commerce, e-commerce, because that Metaverse, you could actually buy virtual asset, but also you could buy physical goods. Imagine going to a Metaverse pizza shop, and then you could actually access a form over there, and then just order pizza directly to your home, right? So that could also add a interactivity for a company in order to sell the pizza or whatever to you, right? And then they talk about public service, like for example, some countries are setting up their embassy in Decentraland or other metaverses, right? So that is another type of use case. They talk about smart manufacturing. So given how it could go beyond gaming, virtual offices, and e-commerce, manufacturing industry is also exploring opportunity with digital twin technology, right? Virtual representation of real-world asset or system which are continuously updated, right? So this is actually smart manufacturing. So their example is our Boeing, which is the airplane company, is trying to build airplanes in the Metaverse, and how Siemens Energy is developing a trend to offer predictive maintenance of power plants, right? So what it means is that there are some game engine or Metaverse engine where they try to simulate reality, right? And with that, they try to do experiments. They try to build infrastructure in that simulated reality so that they could actually save some costs rather than doing it in real life, right? So that is smart manufacturing, how the Metaverse could contribute to the industry, right? They talk about healthcare, how they could do surgery, which is similar to 5G, where there's no latency, where you could do surgery from one place to another place. But in the future, maybe people can use VR, AR to do surgery, but have like a robot or something on the other side to help them really actually do the surgery, right? They talk about education, how Metaverse, you could create different experiences, like go to ancient Rome or something like that to go there, and also how this actually applies to recruitment and training. A lot of interesting analytic insight, right? They also talk about how gaming could be a good way to get people into the Metaverse, right? Because gaming has like a specific, role, a quest or a narrative, so that people could be involved rather than just going to a vast world with no idea what to do, right? So they talk about how gaming could be a very good lead-in for people new to the Metaverse. They talk about different type of games, pay to play, free to play, play to earn, right? And that's where Web3 games come into, right? And also how to they also talk about topics like how to make the Metaverse more open, how to make it more interruptible, whether if the Metaverse is being dominated by just some enterprises, and also there's just a lot of case studies here, and also a different type of big techs entering into the Metaverse, right? So I was talking about a simulated reality, which is similar to NVIDIA's Omniverse, which is a Metaverse or platform to connect 3D simulation and design collaborations, right? So that is similar to what I was saying in terms of new manufacturing industry, right? Metaverse manufacturing, right? So they also have different type of insights talking about the different topics, and then they did a debate between open and closed, which is very similar to Web 2 and Web 3 debate, right? And also how the internet apps actually evolve, and also how if metaverse is gonna be the next internet, whether we should go for a centralized metaverse or maybe a decentralized metaverse, right? And they actually reference this Outer Ventures, and there's actually another report which I checked out as well, which is very interesting, where it talks about if you were to build an operating system for an open metaverse, right? What type of factors are needed, right? And I think these are actually very good check boxes for you to tick in terms of evaluating a Web 2 versus Web 3 metaverse, right? Because in Web 3 metaverse, if everything is decentralized, you need decentralized storage, right? For example, like Aave, Filecoin, Silecoin, or something like that. But in a Web 2 metaverse, it could be just stored on a company's server, right? So there is a very big significance in terms of this. And also they talk about identity, ownership, like DAO in an open metaverse, and how how DAOs themselves could be created, and also their role in terms of governance when it comes to the metaverse, right? And they talk about money as well, DeFi and DAO, and how DeFi being some DeFi platform being decentralized is managed by a DAO. Then they talk about the different type of requirement in terms of infrastructures for the metaverse, right? You need computing power, which is like the CPU, GPU. You need storage, could be decentralized or centralized. You need networking, right? You need low latency internet connection. You need hardware, like the access to in today's virtual world, and game development platforms, like which game engine you're using. And they talk about these in depth, and also how different the cloud computing could do in terms of different type of applications, right? And also that is the good thing for centralization, because you could have more control, you could have more distributing power compared to decentralization, which could be limited by how many nodes are being run in a blockchain or something like that. And they're saying that even though the metaverse is not a AAA game, but then it requires low latency for you to feel immersive in a different type of world, right? And they also talk about the different experiences of different devices that are being developed for like a VR or AR type of experience for a metaverse, and also different technology challenges, right? So and then they also have criticism for Web3, okay? So I would move a little bit faster, and then this is actually talking about if we have digital assets in the metaverse, right? What is needed, like standardization, right? You need like a standard, like a ERC 721 standard, like a digital asset standard. You need it to be interoperable, which could be traded across different chains or maybe different type of metaverse, that it could be traded, right? There is liquidity, and also allow open source apps to build on one another, which is composability and immutability, right? So all of this is about, hey, this is the most optimum digital asset if we talk about a metaverse, and also having more commerce in this virtual world. And also they talk about these NFT characteristics. They talk about how the blockchain and how cryptography supports this, right? And this is basically about NFTs, the potential, how Loots were able to generate other type of NFTs and digital art, its application. So this is actually more about NFT rather than the metaverse, and also its application. So if you're looking for case studies, this would be a good slide to check it out, right? So but then at the back they talk about, okay, here is very good for people new to NFT. It shows that actually all of these NFTs are actually referring to metadata, right? But then some metadata being referred to centralized storage, right, which has a point of failure, right? So that's why you go for IPFS storage, which is like a decentralized type of storage provider. And they talk about the transaction, and then they have Yasu talk about the sandbox metaverse, and also what is the difference between a sandbox and also maybe Roblox or like that, right? And then they talk about virtual real estate, and then actually this is a very insightful reading, because it says that, hey, when you buy virtual land, you really do have to understand what you are buying, right? And also what are you buying, like what rights do you have, right? Because these are virtual, right? And also there is definitely a risk that that value of the land could go to zero, unlike a physical plot of land where you can really build on that, and also just step on it if you really want to, right? So they talk about the dark side NFTs, a lot of counterfeiting problems, watch trading, workforce, and actually these are very recent news. So definitely, if you're interested into NFTs, this section is very helpful and it's a recommended reading. And on the hat, Moxie's criticism of NFTs, right? And so his criticism is actually how a lot of these NFTs are stuck with a centralized API, like for example OpenSea, and also how they're stored in centralized storages, right? So that could be a problem. They talk about money. Money is interesting, right? They talk about the type of settlement, how money could be processed in the metaverse, like in terms of tokens, in-game tokens, ERC20 tokens, money, and also different layers, the settlement layers, like which blockchain is gonna be processing this, and also CBDC, which is government issued money, and how it could play a role in a digital space, right? They also kind of talked about DeFi in the metaverse, and how these different protocols could have a play in the metaverse. So yeah, this is and then if you're interested in DeFi and the money and how DeFi could play a role in this metaverse, this is actually a recommended reading, right? And they talk about how you could enable DeFi in the metaverse, and also what are the possibilities, right? How do you tokenize everything, and how do you manage risk investment in the metaverse, right? Also AMMs, which is automated market making, which is what DeFi protocols are being used, right? So if you're new to DeFi, this is also a very good recommended reading that's not just limited to the metaverse, but also to DeFi in general, and the concept of it, and how payment could be settled in the metaverse, and and how NFT and DeFi can work together. Definitely worth reading. And this is about how Aave protocol works, and also how the total volume locked in DeFi has been increasing exponentially, and different type of layers to support this technology itself. DeFi, okay. But then at the same time, there is a pro and also a con, right? What is the bad thing about DeFi? What is it prone to hack? Is it possible that you and finance, the team decides to no longer pursue the project, could dump the price of the tokens, right? And also, is it sustainable in DeFi, the yields that you're getting? And then finally, we are almost at the end, where they talk about content moderation, privacy ownership, and competition antitrust, which is basically the regulatory aspect regarding the metaverse, right? But to sum it up, the metaverse is just so early right now. There is no way to really talk about the government regulations, right? Of course, governments could do KYC in terms of wallets and stuff like that. But regarding the metaverse, if everything is too decentralized, if there's too many platforms, it's very hard for regulators to really regulate everything, right? And also, when you think about if in the future you start working in the metaverse, how would taxation be charged, right? If you are physically in Asia, but then you are working in the metaverse with a lot of people in North America, are you gonna be taxed by the US, or if you're gonna be taxed by your Asian government, right? So there's a lot of regulatory stuff, compliance stuff that they talk about, and also who owns the metaverse, the IP rights, and it is an interesting take in terms of ownership as well. So if you're interested in ownership NFTs, definitely watch this, because they also talk about Pulp Fiction, right? For those of you who know that the writer actually sold the director actually directed the film, decided to sell the script, but the film company decided that, hey, you actually don't own this, right? And then there is a lawsuit happening. So yeah, like IP ownership, what does it mean to be Creative Commons and stuff like that? What does it mean to give full commercial license right to the NFT holders, right? And personally, I always have a question, and that is, hey, it seems like and companies can actually buy NFT collections, right? So what if the company decides to buy a collection, revoke all of these commercial rights, right? Of course, it'll dump the price, but what if they just want to buy the IP and develop it for a Web2 world, right? Imagine that scenario, right? So a lot of these have no answers yet. But then, and they also talk about the environment and social considerations, right? Is it, do the blockchain use a lot of energy, and also things like that? Would the metaverse use a lot of energy, and so on? So I think, yeah, and that's pretty much it. And also how we need more protection in the metaverse, like minors not being exposed to 18+ content. how do we address bullying, sexual harassment, and abuse of other people in the metaverse. There was a news where there was a woman who went to like a metaverse, right, and then she was touched inappropriately, which resulted, I think it was Facebook, to implement like a 1.5 meter distance in the metaverse, right? So there are things like that that has to be, being regulated or content moderated, right? And then political concerns, because by owning that metaverse or that infrastructure, you basically have like a soft power or political power because you have control in another different type of realm, right? So definitely interesting reading if you are into regulations, if you're into the compliance, right? This part is definitely worth reading, right? And then the last 12 pages is just basically appendix, right? If you're new, like there's a lot of terms that you don't understand, the blockchain, you can actually read this, and decentralized finance and centralized finance. So this is actually a very good reading material, and that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this and how I quickly gone through some of the concepts. And I think when you talk about the metaverse, the really good thing about this report is that it doesn't constrain the metaverse just to be VR or AR, right? But instead it paints a picture of how all of these platforms together could come together to become one big metaverse, and what criteria are needed for a metaverse to be a metaverse, right? It has to be interruptible. Things have to be composable, right? A lot of very high level ideas, but what I really like is how it uses up-to-date information, right? The different type of case studies, examples of how brands are actually using this virtual space to create different experience, how people are using these virtual spaces to create different experiences, right? So it kind of paints a picture to you that, hey, if we continue going down this line, actually the metaverse is not in the future, right? The metaverse is already here. People are already building in the metaverse. People are already interacting with each other in a virtual space with their own 3D avatar. There is tools that enable you to do that. So it really shows you that actually the metaverse is not like a totally new concept invented by Facebook or Meta, but it is a whole concept that really really does encourage us to think where we as humanity is gonna move forward to, right? And also because of COVID, because of the pandemic, many people cannot go out. There's a lot of lockdown, so there is more talk of building a more immersive experience online, right? But what does it really mean, right? As humans, right? Do we want to be stuck in like a virtual world, or that it has its perks, right? You can transform into different worlds, definitely different type of experience that you can have, different type of new businesses, right? Building there, creating art there, charging people to go to an event there, right? But how does the metaverse complements our in real life world, right? So I think that is definitely a very interesting question. Hopefully this report with their own case study, with their own expert opinion, gives you a better idea what exactly people are talking about when they talk about the metaverse. So this is your host Non-Fungible TC, and that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this. In tomorrow's episode, I will talk about a deep dive, which is a similar talk through for another report, which is from ARK Invest, right? For those of you who know, ARK Invest is actually being managed by Cathie Woods, who's a very famous investor, right? So every year, they will launch a report called The Next Big Thing, right? Last year, they talked about cryptocurrencies and also Web3. This year, they have also some new insight, and they just released this report earlier this week, right? So if you like this format, if you want me to go through these reports with you on a live setting, feel free to let me know. But tomorrow's episode would be similar, where I talk about ARK Invest Next Big Thing report. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. This is your host Non-Fungible TC signing out.